Hi, nice to see you again. So I'm not going to share a workbook at, or a presentation with this particular um, topic. This is about defining success. So it's about setting those personal intentions. And normally, I think most people are like, oh, I have goals. I've heard that from everybody. I have goals. But I think there's some tips and tricks and ways to look at it that I think can be wildly helpful. So the first trick, I think, is to not focus on what you think you want, but focus on how you want to feel. And I've got a great anecdote from Martha Beck, who explained she was a consultant or a coach in early days, and she had two clients, and one wanted to start a business and one wanted to have a baby. So her job, she thought, was to help them make appointments and move the ball along, as it were. So one actually started a business and one actually had a baby, and they were both miserable. And so she looked back at that and said, okay, how could we have done this differently? Why are you miserable? So why did you want to start a business? It's always about the why, not the what. So she said, oh, well, I wanted to start a business to have more security. She said, that's not the best way. There are other ways, I guess, to feel more secure. And the one that wanted to have a baby wanted to feel more connected. Also, it's going to take a long time for that to happen. There are other ways to feel more connected, like volunteering or getting in touch with friends. So focusing on your why, I think, is crucial. And then defining how you want it to feel, your life. So I have a flywheel goals that I'll explain in another video. But at the center of that is, if all of these things happened that you wanted to have happen, and we will go through that in a second, how would you feel? So even if my word is, I want to feel electrified, that's, a little bit excited, maybe a little bit scared, definitely awake, alive. For me, that word means something. And when somebody, you're like, why do you want to be a little bit afraid? In my world, fear and exhilaration feel exactly the same. And if I'm not just a little bit scared, I'm not driving fast enough. Keeps me on my toes, makes it interesting. So if you were to define how would things be different, what do I want to have happen? What makes my heart sing? And how often would you want to do that? So I always thought, if I was independently wealthy, if I actually didn't have to work, how would I spend my days? Well, I would, and how much is enough money, right? So I always kind of said, if I could sleep in, meaning wake up without an alarm, eat sushi, play hooky, multiple times a week and not worry about my bank account balance, then that would be enough. And that would make me happy. That would make my heart sing. So I wrote it down. You need 10 things that I think just at least define what an ideal space looks like, sounds like, smells like. And you have to be able to measure it. How often are you doing it? How often are you not doing it? I also measure it on a 1 to 10 happy meter scale. 1 is you'd rather chew your arm off, instead of getting out of bed. And 10 is you're doing a Snoopy dance. I think you can personally be at a 9, but that takes work. It takes kind of constant work. And if I'm not at a 9, it takes awareness to say, okay, what's bringing me down, or what am I not doing that would lift me up? Those tend to be at the bottom of the list, especially for entrepreneurs, especially for women entrepreneurs, because we put everybody else first, and I mean everybody. So then it's identifying what's in my way. Why am I not doing these things? What is sucking up my time and energy? I do have a video in here about killing vampires, time and energy suckers. That's a good place to start. But identifying what's in your way and then chipping away at those, they can be so easy to get rid of, but we just kind of let them sit on the back burner, and we don't focus on them as an enemy to be battled. I think there's also a defining for yourself. Defining for yourself how you win. So when I wanted to be an author, I got totally stuck. I got in my own way. The best advice I got was, don't try to sound smart. The second best advice I got was, define why you want to write a book. Do you want to make a living at it? Do you want just the notoriety that comes with being published? Do you want people to read it and actually help them? Or do you just need to get it off your chest? And at the beginning, of course, I want to help people, but I really decided I just wanted to get it off my chest. I did it for me. Writing briefs at an agency, I did for me because my bosses didn't quite understand what it was about yet. And when I wanted to be an artist or be able to call myself an artist, I had to define the line in the sand. And my line in the sand was, if I sold a piece for more than $300, completely arbitrary, to someone other than my mom, thanks, Claire, then I could call myself an artist. This was not something that was bestowed upon me. It was me bestowing it upon myself. So you have to decide where your line is and when you're allowed to call it a win. The last thing I will ask you to do is to write this stuff down. There is power and magic in writing it down that I can't explain. I don't know that anybody can explain, but there is an anecdote. I want to say it's a book called Creating Wealth. It's an old one, David Allen, I want to say, but there was a study done in the 60s, and they wanted to know how many people graduating from Harvard, so graduating class, had financial goals for themselves. And then they wanted to know how many of those who had financial goals for themselves actually wrote those goals down. And they went back 20 years later to the same group of people, and the Harvard graduating class in the 60s was pretty homogenous. And they found that those that had goals but didn't write them down were no different from people who didn't have goals. But the ones who did write them down, that 3%, made more money than the other 97% combined. And they could attribute it to nothing else but writing it down. So I made these short so you could keep going, carry on. Writing down your flywheel goals is going to be huge, but defining success is going to help you with feng shui and keeping your fires alive. Godspeed.